All right, ladies and gentlemen, part 3 of our video series on genetics. This time we're looking at Punnett squares. So Punnett squares are obviously this square grid-like diagram. What we're going to do is we're going to take the genotypes, or the combination of genes for each parent. We're going to put one on the top and one on the side. So we'll take them and divide them so that one gene, or one of the letters, gets placed on the top of each column and on the left side of each row. You remember lowercase t's or lowercase b's. Any of these lowercase letters represent a recessive trait, while the capital letter represents that dominant trait. So that the next step is to transfer all of those letters into those middle spaces. So this lowercase t will be brought down into this box and this box, while this capital T will be brought to the right into that box and ultimately into that box as well. And this lowercase t is brought across into that box and that box in the end as well. So because this box in the top left has gotten a capital T from the left and a lowercase t from the top, it is finished. While this box down here got a lowercase t from the top and a lowercase t from the left, and so it is finished. When we're done, all 4 boxes should have 2 letters, one from each parent, like this one. All right, so let's look at a common example. If I have 2 homozygous parents, like the left parent here is homozygous dominant, it has 2 capital B's, while this parent here is homozygous recessive, it has 2 lowercase b's. Obviously, the dominant color is brown eye, and lowercase or recessive color is blue eye. But when the parent with blue eyes transfers their lowercase b down into all 4 boxes, and the dominant parent with brown eyes transfers a capital B into all 4 boxes, you notice that all 4 boxes end up exactly the same. So 4 out of 4, or 100% of the kids, will have heterozygous, capital and lowercase b, for brown eyes. Which means all 4 kids are going to have the same eye color as this one parent, even though they're all heterozygous and not exactly the same genotype as, say, this one parent. Well, here's a more interesting example. Suppose both parents were heterozygous, meaning they had the ability to give either brown or blue. That means that when we do this Punnett square, I'm going to bring this capital B brown downward and across. So that the top left child, 1 out of 4 kids, could end up capital B, and have brown eyes. While in the bottom right, we get lowercase b coming down and a lowercase b coming across, and you end up with lowercase, or homozygous recessive for blue eyes. And then the other 2 kids, 2 out of 4 for 50%, would be heterozygous, 1 of each, and they'll still have that brown eye appearance or phenotype. So 3 out of the 4 kids are going to have brown eyes, but only 1 of them will be homozygous brown, 1 of them will be homozygous blue recessive. And so 2 parents with brown eyes could actually end up having a kid with blue eyes. All right, this is where things get a little more interesting. Basically, you're not always going to have 1 dominant and 1 recessive allele. There are some slightly more complicated examples. So for that kind of notation, we'll occasionally use 2 capital letters, but we'll use a little subscript to tell them apart. So if both black and white fur were both dominant, we would just say fur black, fur white. And all of these would just be capital letters to indicate that everything is dominant. Okay, so let's see what can happen here. Suppose I have 2 dominant alleles, but they're incompletely dominating with each other. So we would say that if capital C, both for color, but red is one allele version of color, then we could have a red flower that's capital C, capital R, capital C, capital R. And so that would be homozygous red. But if the white plant is capital C, capital W, then we have 2 homozygous parents that when they mix together, they make a heterozygous pink. Kind of an interesting case. And then, of course, you can see the heterozygous pink flowers could then reproduce and create a whole mixture, either homozygous red, homozygous white, or heterozygous pink. Codominance is different from incomplete dominance, where they're not blending anymore. Now they're going side by side. So if I have a white bull, so this could be like color, I flipped these, I'm sorry. So if we have the white colored bull and the brown-colored cow, they mix and instead produce a brown and white cow. So this heterozygous isn't light brown the way you would expect with incomplete dominance. It's instead co-dominant, so white and brown at the same time. Side by side, not mixed. All right, so let's do a comparison of incomplete and co-dominance. If we put red and white together, incomplete dominance would mix them and create an in-between color, like pink. But with co-dominance, if you put red and white together, they don't mix. Instead, they both show side by side, red and white. All right, hopefully we're clear on co-dominance versus incomplete. Let's look at some other interesting cases. Just for fun, you could take a look at this and figure out whether you think that there's more incomplete or co-dominance going on here, but this is more of a joke. Blood types. Here's just a fun example of where things get interesting. Your blood could be either have the A allele, the B allele, or the O allele. So we have 3 different allele types, but A and B are both co-dominant. So if you inherit A from mom and B from dad, or vice versa, you might be A and B at the same time. They will be co-dominant. So that's that side-by-side thing. Whereas if you were to inherit A and O, A is actually dominant over O. So you would just call yourself blood type A. They wouldn't even worry about that O because it doesn't really do anything. If you were to inherit B and O, then B would just dominate the O and you just say you're blood type B. But if you inherit nothing but O, recessive, you would be OO, then yeah, you would have blood type O. So O being recessive, you would have to have 2 of the same type, homozygous recessive, in order to have that O blood type. It's more rare. Because if you had either A or B, it would cover it up and you'd just be blood type A or blood type B. And since they are co-dominant, when you have both at the same time, you would be considered AB simultaneously. All right. Multiple alleles. So just like that blood type where we see there were 3 different options, here we can see these chinchillas and rabbits come in 4 different allele types. You could have the recessive white, the Himalayan, color H, the chinchilla, color CH, and wild type or brown, just capital C. And capital C dominates all 3 of these other options. But because white, Himalayan, and chinchilla are all written as lowercase c's, it means that they are all basically co-dominant to each other. So Himalayan will never dominate white, chinchilla won't dominate white, but brown will dominate all 3. Okay. Polygenic. This is where things really get interesting. Basically, if you think about things like skin color and height, there aren't just 2 extreme ends of the spectrum. Not everybody is NBA basketball tall or Hobbit short. So what we're basically seeing here is that there are multiple different genes. It's a bigger Punnett square because you're not just going to inherit 1 gene from mom and 1 gene from dad, and that's the end of the story. Instead, you might be inheriting many genes. So on this spectrum, you can kind of see where, let's say you could inherit up to 3 black melanin producing alleles from mom and up to 3 black melanin producing alleles from dad, or 3 white and 3 white. So only if you inherit all 3 white from mom and all 3 white from dad would you end up on the lightest end of the melanin spectrum, and only if you inherit all 3 dark from dad and all 3 dark from mom would you end up with all 6 dark. So the vast majority of possible outcomes are somewhere in between, some combination of light and dark. And this is why most people on Earth are not the darkest of dark complected skin or the lightest of light complected skin. Statistically, most people have inherited some amount of melanin, and ultimately, this is why it's kind of ridiculous to even buy into the notion of racism when most people can't really be defined as purely white or purely dark. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to one final point that's pretty important, and that's this idea of what is a naturally inherited trait versus what is acquired or influenced by the environment. So spiders can't teach their young how to build a web. They actually would eat their children. So instead, when we think about instincts that animals inherit, it's actually built into their DNA, just like your hair color or eye color are built into your DNA. However, acquired traits might be something like a scar, where you weren't born with that scar. So two twins might develop into two different, very different people through all the experiences and activities of their life. And then environmental influences, this is again on that acquired trait side. So if you were born with diabetes, that would be type 1 diabetes. But many people who have diabetes actually develop it over the course of their lifetime through having a bad diet. Similarly, if you were born with the trait that you would someday go bald, you don't necessarily have that baldness when you're a child. It's over the course of your life that you then might go through puberty and have those traits expressed later. All right, that's it for part 3. Thank you very much.